In a few hours, sometimes less, depending on when you are watching this, the government releases a number that every trader, every economist, and every Fed official in the country will react to within seconds. And buried underneath that headline number, in a part of the report almost nobody outside professional economics ever reads, sits a statistic that should genuinely concern you more than whatever the front page number says. So far this year, even while officials kept describing the labor market as stable, the actual number of employed Americans has fallen by 833,000 people, not job growth slowing, an actual decline. And the official unemployment rate barely moved the entire time. I am going to explain exactly how both of those things can be true at once, why it matters enormously for what happens to your money in the next few hours, and why the Federal Reserve itself is more divided about what to do next than it has been in a decade. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will understand a report that most people watching it drop this morning will completely misread. Here is the twist, and I am giving it to you immediately instead of making you wait, because it explains everything else in this video. The unemployment rate is not actually a measure of how many people have jobs. It is a ratio, people without jobs who are actively looking, divided by the total labor force. If people stop looking for work entirely, discouraged, retired early, or simply given up, they disappear from that ratio completely. They are not counted as unemployed. They are just gone from the calculation. That is exactly what has been happening underneath the surface this year. The headline rate has sat calmly around 4.2%, looking stable, looking fine, while the actual pool of working Americans has quietly shrunk by hundreds of thousands of people who simply stopped being counted. A calm number on the surface, a genuinely uncomfortable reality underneath it. And this morning's report is about to either confirm that pattern is deepening or offer the first real sign it is turning around. Before I go further, I want to know who is with me right now. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And tell me honestly whether you knew before this video that the unemployment rate can stay flat even while the real number of working people falls. I read these, and I promise you the pattern in the comments under a video like this always shows the same thing. That this distinction, simple as it sounds once explained, is something almost nobody outside finance has ever had laid out clearly for them. Let me walk you through exactly what is happening today and why it carries so much weight. This morning, or very shortly from whenever you are watching, the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases the July employment report. Economists across major banks have published forecasts ranging anywhere from roughly 75,000 to just over 120,000 new jobs, an unusually wide spread that itself tells you how genuinely uncertain professional forecasters are about which direction this economy is actually leaning. That uncertainty did not come from nowhere. It follows a June report that came in at just 57,000 jobs, badly missing an expectation of 110,000. And it follows something even more revealing, quiet downward revisions to the 2 months before that. April's original number was revised down by 31,000 jobs. May's was revised down by 43,000. Combined, that is 74,000 jobs that the government initially told the public existed and then quietly walked back months later once more complete data came in. This is not a conspiracy. Revisions are a normal, routine part of how this data works. But a consistent pattern of initial numbers looking better than the revised reality is exactly the kind of pattern that shows up right before a labor market turns. Because the true weakness takes time to fully surface in the data. If you are finding this useful already, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, because the next part is where this stops being a story about statistics and becomes a story about what the Federal Reserve is actually arguing about behind closed doors. And it is more dramatic than most people realize. 8 days ago, the Federal Reserve held its policy meeting and voted to keep interest rates steady in a range of 3.5% to 3.75%. On the surface, a hold uneventful. Underneath it, the vote came in 9-3, the most divided decision this committee has made since 2016. 3 regional Federal Reserve presidents dissented, and their disagreement did not run toward wanting faster relief for a softening labor market. They wanted rates higher, warning that waiting too long to act now risks a far more painful correction later. That dissent split the room over inflation risk at almost the exact moment the labor market itself has been quietly weakening underneath the surface. Read that combination carefully. Some of the most powerful people in the room are worried inflation is not under control. At the same time, the labor market has been shedding real workers from its participation numbers for months. Those two concerns pull policy in opposite directions. And today's report is the single most important piece of evidence either side gets to point to before the next full decision arrives on September 15th and 16th. Here is why. This reaches directly into your gold, your silver, and anything else you hold. If this morning's report comes in soft, extending the pattern of misses and revisions, it hands ammunition to the side of the Fed that wants to move cautiously, or even cut. And historically, when rate cut expectations build gold and silver, assets that pay no interest tend to become more attractive relative to cash. If the report instead comes in hot, surprising to the upside, it strengthens the case. The 3 dissenters already made in public, increasing the odds of a hike in September, which historically pressures gold and silver in the other direction. Both outcomes are genuinely possible this morning. Both would move your money in opposite directions within minutes of release. And underneath either outcome sits the deeper, quieter story. That 833,000 fewer Americans are actually working this year than were before. A fact the headline rate alone will never tell you no matter which way today's number breaks. Let me make this real with 2 people, because none of this matters until you see how it lands in an actual life. Neither is real, but both are the kind of person you might recognize. The first I will call Wallace 70, who checks the unemployment rate the way most people do, glancing at the headline number, seeing it holding steady near 4%, and concluding the labor market must be fine. Wallace has never looked past that single number, so he has spent the year feeling reassured by a statistic that was quietly telling him less and less about what was actually happening underneath it. When today's report drops, whichever direction it breaks, Wallace will react to the single headline figure and move on, never noticing the deeper story sitting one layer beneath it. The second person, I will call Adele, 68, and she learned somewhere along the way that a headline rate is a starting point, not the whole picture. She checks not just the unemployment rate, but the actual employment level itself, the raw number of working Americans, and she noticed months ago that number was quietly falling even while the rate stayed calm. When today's report comes out, she will not just read the top line. She will look at whether the participation rate moved, whether the prior months got revised again, and whether the underlying employment level is still shrinking regardless of what the headline percentage says. Wallace and Adele will read the exact same report this morning. One of them will understand what actually happened. The other will only understand what the headline told him to believe. The difference between them was never intelligence, and it was never access to some secret data feed. Every number Adele checks is publicly available in the same report. Wallace reads, the difference is that one of them learned which numbers inside a jobs report actually matter, and one of them stopped at the first one. Now, why do so many careful, intelligent people end up like Wallace, trusting a single headline percentage without ever looking underneath it? There is a simple, well-documented reason. Headline numbers are designed for speed, a single figure meant to be absorbed in a glance, repeated on television, printed in a single sentence. The mind naturally treats a number that's simple as complete because it is presented as complete, even when the methodology behind it quietly excludes an enormous and growing group of people who have simply stopped being counted. This is not a flaw unique to this particular statistic. It is a pattern that shows up across almost every simplified number the public is handed, and the investors who consistently see the real picture are rarely smarter in some general sense. They have simply built the habit of asking what a clean, simple number is actually leaving out. There is a historical echo worth knowing here, because this exact pattern, a calm headline number sitting on top of a quietly weakening reality, has shown up before, right before a major turn. In the period leading into the 2008 financial crisis, early monthly employment reports looked far better than the eventual revised reality. Payroll figures that seemed merely soft in real time were later revised down substantially once the full picture became clear, months after the moment when that information would have actually been useful. The lesson from that era is not that today is a repeat of it, because history never repeats exactly. The lesson is that a pattern of initial numbers looking better than the revisions that follow is one of the oldest, most reliable early warning signs in all of labor market data, and it is precisely the pattern that has been quietly building underneath this year's reports. Now, let me be careful and honest with you, because I will not insult you with fear, and this exact subject draws people who want to frighten you into a rushed decision. It is entirely possible today's report comes in solidly in line with expectations, or even surprises meaningfully to the upside. And some respected forecasters genuinely expect exactly that, a rebound built largely on hiring returning to leisure and hospitality after a soft June. It is also worth knowing that not every serious voice on this agrees the labor market is weakening in a way that demands concern. Some economists remain confident conditions stay merely stable rather than deteriorating, while others, including a well-known out-of-consensus call from one major bank, actually expect the Fed to cut rates 3 separate times before the end of the year, specifically because they see this labor weakness as the dominant story now, not inflation. Genuinely smart, informed people disagree with each other about which of these threads wins. And anyone telling you today's outcome is obvious in either direction is overstating their own certainty. What I am giving you is not a prediction of this morning's exact number. It is the framework to actually read it correctly the moment it lands, instead of reacting only to the single headline figure, the way most of the market will. And today is only the first domino in a run of data that decides this argument over the next 2 weeks. Not the last. July's inflation report lands on August 12th, followed by the producer price report on August 13th, both of which will tell us whether the price pressures the 3 dissenting officials are worried about are actually easing or building. Then, on August 19th, the Federal Reserve publishes the full minutes from that divided July meeting, giving the public its first real look at exactly how heated that disagreement between the officials actually got behind closed doors. By the time the Fed sits down again on September 15th and 16th to make its next decision, it will have all of this evidence in hand. Today's jobs number, 2 inflation reports, and its own internal minutes laid bare. Today is not an isolated event. It is the opening argument in a 2-week case that ends with a real decision. And understanding where today fits inside that larger sequence is worth far more than reacting to a single number in isolation. I want to say a word about silver here too, because it carries this story a little differently than gold does. Silver is both a monetary metal, moving with the same interest rate expectations gold moves with, and a heavily consumed industrial material, used in solar panels, electronics, and a wide range of modern manufacturing that does not care what today's jobs number says. That industrial floor is part of why silver has surged so dramatically over the past year, even through a genuinely brutal correction along the way. When rate expectations swing hard in either direction, the way they are likely to this morning, silver tends to move further and faster than gold in whichever direction the news breaks, precisely because both of its identities, monetary and industrial, are getting pulled by the same headline at once. So let us pull this together and go back to where we started. In a matter of hours, the government releases a jobs report that the market is already deeply divided about, following a June miss and back-to-back downward revisions to the 2 months before it. arriving exactly 1 week after the most divided Federal Reserve vote in a decade, with 3 officials publicly pushing for higher rates rather than cuts. Whichever way today's headline number breaks, it will move gold, silver, and the interest rate outlook within minutes. But the deeper story, the one that will still be true, no matter what today's single number says, is that 833,000 fewer Americans are working this year than were before. A fact the calm, steady headline rate has been quietly hiding from anyone who never looked past it. Here is what I want you to carry away from this, stated as plainly as I know how. This is not a call to panic over a single data release. And it is not a call to make any sudden move today, because balance and patience matter, especially for anyone near or already in retirement. It is a call to stop reading the unemployment rate as the whole story, because it was never designed to be one, and to understand that the gap between a calm headline and a quietly weakening reality underneath it is exactly the kind of gap where careful investors position themselves before everyone else notices. Whether a modest, deliberate allocation to gold or silver belongs in your own plan depends entirely on your own circumstances, your own timeline, and your own comfort with volatility. And I am not here to tell you the number. I am here to make sure that when this morning's headline crosses your screen, you already know which deeper number to check before you react to it. Do not let anyone use this report to rush you into a costly decision today, because there will be people trying, and they get louder every time a number like this drops. And do not dismiss the deeper story, either telling yourself a single percentage point on a government report could not possibly matter to your own retirement account, because that single percentage point is about to move gold, silver, and the entire interest rate conversation within minutes of release. Those are 2 different mistakes, and the sensible path sits calmly between them. None of this is financial advice. Every figure I have referenced, the 833,000 decline in employment, the 9-3 Fed vote, and the 3 dissenting presidents, the June miss, and the April and May revisions, the range of forecasts for today's report, comes directly from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Federal Reserve's own published materials. So you can verify every word of it yourself rather than take mine. I opened by telling you that a number drops in a few hours and that a statistic hidden underneath it should worry you more than the headline will. Now you understand exactly why. A calm unemployment rate sitting on top of 833,000 missing workers. A Federal Reserve more divided than it has been in a decade. And a report this morning that decides which of those forces wins for now. So, let me leave you with the question underneath all of it. When the headline number crosses your screen in a few hours, and everyone around you reacts to that single figure, will you be reacting to the same thing they are? Or will you already be looking at the number underneath it that actually tells you the truth?